Hey all, it's Matt, your average gamer, and for this video we're going to be going over my top 20 powerful Somber weapons in Elden Ring ranked with builds. We're going to have powerful builds for each one. We're also going to go over the best starting class for each individual build and what stats to level up along the way. We'll be answering common questions I get about each endgame build, and we're going to go with powerful builds for each one too. We're going to start here at number 20 with Eleonora's Poleblade, a Dex and Arcane build that has a fantastic and also very fun Ash of War. This weapon's Ash of War, by the way, will scale with mostly AR, but it has a heavy leaning towards Arcane. The weapon itself, despite the D in Arcane, gets a lot of points from Arcane because both the fire and the bleed damage will scale with your Arcane stat. Also, a quick shout out real quick to ExpressVPN, the VPN I use and trust. There is 3 extra months free on a yearly subscription in the description below. Be sure to check that out and other ways to support the channel below. And of course, now we're going to talk about Eleonora's Poleblade a little bit more. There's a lot you can do with this weapon, by the way. I've done a showcase for it on my alternate channel. You could throw in a offhand twin blade and cold affinity for a lot of damage because the fire will reset frost. And of course, the Ash of War is absolutely ridiculous. Yeah, the Ash of War on this one can do a ton of damage. It actually does a decent amount of poise damage throughout the Ash of War as well. You get a good amount of bleed build up and a ton of successive attack damage. This is New Game Plus 7, by the way, for all footage in this entire video. And we're going to take down the dragon in a second here. This dragon, by the way, will have the maximum amount of HP it'll get. It's fairly slash and bleed resistant and also decently fire resistant. So probably not the best boss to take on, but it does show a nice highlight for Eleonora's Poleblade as it works against most bosses. And we're going to go over equipment for this awesome build and setup. We have Eleonora's Poleblade plus 10. We're using the Dragon Communion Seal because it scales with Arcane. Check out the armor set. We have the White Mask, Shard of Alexander, Maleficent's Prosthesis, Rotten Wing Sword Insignia, Lord of Blood's Exaltation. We have the Thorny tier, Faith tier. And for stats, in a second here, we're going to go over the stats for this build. Then we're going to talk about the starting class and what stats to level up along the way. We have 60 Vigor, 21 Mind, 25 Endurance, 45 Dexterity Arcane. We're using Golden Vow and Flame Grant Me Strength for our buffs. And for the location for Eleonora's Poleblade, you could find it at the Second Church of Marika. That is in the Altless Plateau. It's not too hard to find. That's kind of around the mid-game, not too bad. Now we're going to go into best starting class, which is Bandit. Bandit is immediately going to give you Dexterity and Arcane, so that's going to be a huge plus. After that, you're going to focus on Vigor, Endurance, and of course Dexterity and Arcane. And next up here at number 19, we have another personal favorite in Ordovis' Greatsword. Ordovis' Greatsword is a really fun Strength and Faith weapon, and anybody that knows Faith knows Strength and Faith can be an absolute blast to use. The Ash of War primarily does physical damage and scales with AR, and the weapon actually gets an A in Strength scaling. A cool weapon to try out for sure. Definitely try out Ordovis' Greatsword if you like Strength and Faith, or even just Strength. It does get an A in Strength scaling, and if you like posture breaking bosses too, because you could do that with this one. Let's jump into equipment here. For equipment, we have Ordovis' Greatsword plus 10. We're using the Erdtree Seal, but we're mainly just using it for buffs. We have the Crucible Axe set on, Shard of Alexander, Godfrey Icon, Ritual Swords Talisman, Erdtree's Favorite plus 2. We have the Holy tier, Faith tier. Let's jump into stats for this one. And for stats, we're going to check out the stats now. We have 60 Vigor, we have 50 Strength, 75 Strength when we're two-handing it with the two-handed bonus. We have 45 Faith with the Faith tier. We're using Golden Vow, Hellish Shabriri to buff this, and we're also adding in Blessing's Boon for some extra HP. Overall, these are solid stats for a powerful Ordovis' Greatsword build. And now we're going to talk about location. The location is, if I'm saying it correctly, Ariza's Hero's Grave, however you say it. It's in the Altless Plateau. There you have to take on the boss at the bottom of that dungeon. And for the best starting class here, we have Confessor. Confessor will start with Faith and a little bit of Strength and Dexterity too. We are going to focus on Strength, Faith, Vigor, and Endurance for this one. Next up here at number 18, we have the Black Knife. This is another one I really like, especially as a pocket missile, essentially. This is literally one of those weapons that's so light, and the Ash of War is entirely Faith scaling that you could throw it on any Faith build and just switch to this at any time to get in some holy and percentage damage. Yeah, the fact that it's all Faith is super helpful, because if you go for something like an incantation build and you happen to have around 70-80 Faith anyway, you could always just add this to your build, and it doesn't weigh much. I think it's 2.5 or around 3 or so, so it's great to have as an extra weapon. We ended up taking on Morgott, who I think is decently holy resistant, but he still takes really good damage from this as a faith build. It's kind of awesome. I love the fact that you get the percentage damage out of it too. It does make up for a little bit for the fact that holy damage isn't as good as it should be, and hopefully it will be better in DLC. By the way, I just want to mention real quick, if you guys have followed to this point, definitely be sure to subscribe for more Elden Ring content. Hit that like button too, that helps me out a lot. And also, comment what build you're bringing into DLC, as I'm curious as to what you guys are bringing into Shadow of the Erdtree. Yeah, this weapon, by the way, a lot of these weapons I'm going to be using the Ash of War mostly because the unique Ash of Wars, in my opinion, are the best part about a lot of these weapons, and you're going to get the most damage out of the unique Ash of Wars as well. Really cool weapon, though. Definitely, again, something that you can just throw into your arsenal, and your equipment load isn't going to, take a hit with this weapon because it's so light, and the Ash of War is entirely faith scaling. Perfect for pure faith builds, just to have a backup weapon. It's pretty awesome. We're going to go over equipment, stats, everything you need to know here soon. Yeah, recommend this one 100% for faith builds, just to have on hand. And holy damage might be good in DLC. We have the Black Knife plus 10. We're using the Erdtree Seal. You can check out the armor set. We have 51 poise. We have the Shard of Alexander, Sacred Scorpion Charm, Ritual Swords Talisman, Ritual Shield Talisman. Then lastly, we have the Holy Tier, Faith Tier, and we're using Margit Shackle to stun the boss. Let's jump into stats. And for stats, we have 60 Vigor, 22 Mind, 23 Endurance, 20 Strength, so you can run incantations and even use the Jellyfish Shield. You can run the Blasphemous Blade with stats like this too. 80 Faith, Golden Vow, and Hellish Fury to buff this. Let's talk about the location. And the location for this weapon is in the Altless Plateau. It's by the other dungeon here. I guess on this character I hadn't been there yet, but it's right in this vicinity over here, and it's not too bad to get. The best starting class for this one would be the Prophet. Since you're mainly faith-based and you just need a little bit of dexterity investment, you would focus on Vigor, Mind, and of course Faith. And the next one up here at number 17 is the Sacred Relic Sword, which is an absolute mob destroyer, and if Holy ends up being good in DLC, this could be a phenomenal weapon. It destroys Deathbirds too, and the Wave of Gold has an incredible range and used to be really great in PvP too. Yeah, this is one that you definitely got to try out too. You do get this from the final boss. I'll give you an idea on the map where it is, but it's pretty straightforward since it's the final boss, Remembrance. Now, you have the option for Marika's Hammer or Sacred Relic Sword if you don't duplicate the Remembrance. I recommend doing it though because both weapons have their uses, and this is one of the best rune farming weapons too. Yeah, and again, as you see on the Deathbirds, it's absolutely ridiculous for them. If you have any trouble with the Deathbirds, the Sacred Relic Sword between the range and the pure holy damage, because they take increased holy damage, is a fantastic option. By the way, that's where you get Death's Poker. We're going to mention that one later. Let's jump into equipment. And we have the Sacred Relic Sword, preferably plus 10. We have the Erdtree Seal. We have 51 poise. We have the Shard of Alexander. We have the Sacred Scorpion Charm. Ritual Swords Talisman. Ritual Shield Talisman. We have the Holy Tier, Dexterity Tier. I'm going to explain that one in a second. So I didn't want to waste a larval tier from one of the other stats that I was doing for Faith. You do need 24 dexterity for this, so you would probably just go for 60 Faith instead because that'll pretty much cap the Ash of War anyway, and make sure you have the minimum requirements, which are relatively high, of 24 dexterity. As you continue to level this one up, by the way, definitely go for more Mind and Endurance. It helps a lot. This one does chew through your Endurance and Mind. We're using Golden Vow and Hellish Fury for buffs. Now we're going to talk about location, and you get this from the final boss, Remembrance. And there it is, past the Elden Throne right there on the map in Ashen Capital. That's where you would fight the final boss and get his Remembrance to get the Sacred Relic Sword. The best starting class I would, in my opinion here, I would go for is the Confessor class, because you're going to need a little bit of strength and dexterity anyway, that 24 dex requirement, and faith. You're going to focus Vigor, Endurance, Mind, Faith, and Dex. And next one up here at number 16 is one I used recently and one I'm really enjoying lately, and that is the Sword of Night and Flame, which is still good. It's not launch good, but it still can be a powerful weapon that gives you two options, both fire and, of course, magic damage with the beam. Yeah, this is a really good one still. It does have a little bit of a short range on the beam, but the beam does good damage, as you can see right here, and the fire damage is good too for certain bosses like the tree avatars, and it actually works really well against mobs as well. I think this is actually be a really fun weapon to bring into DLC, because if you had the right stats for it, you'd have fire damage and magic damage on the beam, and if you got a decent intelligent investment as well, if you invest in intelligence a little bit, you could also go in for some decent spells too to combine with the build and overall turn it into something really good. But if I know us, we're probably going to go for the most overpowered stuff into DLC, although with the new combat mechanics coming up where we're going to have to actually kind of defeat stuff along the way to become powerful, it could be interesting how some of these builds end up turning out. Let's jump into equipment. And for equipment, we have the Sword of Night and Flame, plus 10. We have any staff for Terra Magica, any seal for buffs, although if you use the Golden Order seal, you'll get over 300 scaling, and it's also weightless. We hit 51 poise. The Spellblade set will boost the beam. We have the Shard of Alexander, Magic Scorpion Charm, Ritual Swords Talisman, Ritual Shield Talisman, Magic Tier, Faith Tier so we can do buffs and also to add to the fire damage. Let's jump into stats. And for stats, we have 60 Vigor, 22 Mind, 25 Endurance. We have 60 Intelligence, 33 Faith with the Faith Tier. We're using Golden Vow, Hallowed Superior, and Terra Magica. You can get this at Caria Manor by the lower level Site of Grace. It's not too far from there. If you do a little bit of walking around, you can find it quite easily. It's a little bit hidden, but not too bad. The best starting class here is the Astrologer, in my opinion, because you're going to focus on the beam, which is the better part. And then you're going to focus Vigor, Mind, Intelligence, and of course Faith too. And at number 15, we have the Starscourge Greatswords. Now, these do have a little bit of a fall off on New Game Plus and beyond, something I talk about with weapons like Moonveil and a few other weapons, but these do great physical damage and all around a solid strength option. And taking on Radahn is really fun with these, by the way, because it's literally my slam versus his. I've done this a couple of times, and if you're ever looking for a really fun fight, take the Starscourge Greatswords into the Radahn fight. It's something you will not regret doing. You kind of end up doing the same exact Ash of War that Radahn does. And by the way, he does take increased damage from gravity-type weapons by about 20%, and the physical damage and the slam down and stuff is a lot. On New Game and even New Game Plus, you can even get in a posture break. It's possible. Oh, real quick, want to mention, by the way, the Discord is in the pinned comment. It's been a little bit slow lately. We've got over 700 members, which is pretty cool. But when Elden Ring DLC comes around, that Discord is going to be a very busy Discord, I imagine, because anytime the game picks up, it always picks up a lot. Definitely be sure to join that, and hopefully we get some people like trading stuff, helping each other. It's been a lot of fun. Yeah, we already have a lot of people helping each other, which is pretty cool, but we could just add to it. It's going to be awesome. Co-op, PvP, all that stuff. I may even do some PvP on my alternate channel, too. I'm considering that. If anybody's interested in that, you can comment below. I'm considering getting into that a little bit ahead of DLC, as we're looking for stuff to do. Alright, and Radahn's going to go down here soon. We're going to be able to defeat him with the Starscourge Greatswords. We ended up having a little bit of an epic battle here. I got hit a lot, but the animation on the Ash of War is really long. That is one downside, but for smaller enemies, the initial gravity will pull them in, and the slam down will probably take them out. Yeah, these look really cool, too. I had them actually on the thumbnail. I really like the way the Starscourge Greatswords look. I think they're an awesome-looking weapon. Let's jump into equipment and stats. For equipment, we have the Starscourge Greatswords plus 10. The Highland Axe will boost this with the passive. Any seal for buffs for using the Knight's Cavalry set altered. We have 51 poise. And we have the Shard of Alexander, Magic Scorpion Charm, Arsenal Charm plus 1. We have the Roar Medallion. We have the Magic Tier, Faith Tier. Let's jump into stats. And for stats, we have 60 Vigor, 60 Strength. We have 20 Intelligence. You don't have to invest too much Intelligence. This is going to lean a lot more towards Strength and physical damage. 23 Mind, 26 Endurance, 25 Faith with the Faith Tier, Golden Vow, Flame Grant Me Strength. And of course, you get this at Redmaid Castle with Radahn's Remembrance. There's actually a portal at Fort Gale or Fort Goal, however you say it, and you can take that portal to Redmain Castle to take on Radahn and get the Remembrance. And the best starting class for this one is probably the Wretch. The Hero class has good strength, but you don't need the Arcane. You're going to focus Vigor, Endurance, Strength, and Intelligence. And the next one up here at number 14 is Moonveil. Another one that does have a little bit of a fall off on New Game Plus and beyond, especially by the time you get to New Game Plus 7 here. But Moonveil is still very good. It's a reliable weapon. It does good poise damage, good magic damage, and it also has good dexterity scaling too. The beam part of the Ash of War is going to scale entirely with your intelligence stat, and the physical part that you hit with is going to scale with dexterity. This is very much a split weapon, and I recommend investing in both. Let's jump into equipment, stats, everything you need to know. And of course we have Moonveil plus 10, any seal for buffs, any staff for Terra Magical will increase the damage. The Spellblade set will boost this. We hit 51 poise. Shard of Alexander, Magic Scorpion Charm, Ritual Swords Talisman, Ritual Shield Talisman. We have the Magic Tier, Faith Tier. And now we're going to jump into stats. We have 60 Vigor, 22 Mind, 25 Endurance, 16 Strength, 40 Dexterity, and 40 Intelligence. Very much split there. We have 25 Faith using the Faith Tier. And then to buff this, we're using Golden Vow, 15% more attack and defense. Flame Grant Me Strength for 20% more on the physical part. And then Terra Magica will boost the beam by 35% in total. And you can get Moonveil very early in Elden Ring. It's one of the best weapons to grab early. It does have a little bit of hefty stat requirements early in the game, but you can get it in Gale Tunnel and Caelid. And the best starting class is going to be the Prisoner because it's going to give you both Dexterity and Intelligence. After of which you're going to focus on Vigor, Mind, Intelligence, and Dexterity. And next one up here at number 13 is Glintstone Kris, which is essentially a pocket comet. It's chargeable, pure magic damage, easy to buff, and again, since it's light for a dagger, it's something that you can add to any mage build. The Ash of War on it is purely intelligence, so that's really helpful if you're running a pure mage build and you want kind of a backup weapon. I know some people call it a battle mage once you add a weapon, but it's a dagger that's essentially a pocket comet. You're probably going to be using the Ash of War anyway. I still consider that a mage. No doubt a cool weapon and a good one that we're going to take on the Draconic Tree Sentinel and Farum with, and he is very tough, by the way. A lot of people tell me they struggle with this boss. I don't really struggle with him that much anymore. I did get hit a couple of times here, but I think he only took one try for me. It's not too bad. Most builds that I use can take him down fairly fast. Overall, though, he's definitely a tough boss. Let's jump into equipment. And we have Glintstone Kris, plus 10. We have Lucett's Staff. We're using the Golden Order Seal. The Spellblade set will boost us. We have 51 Poise. The Shard of Alexander. We have first Talisman slot. Magic Scorpion Charm. Ritual Swords Talisman. Godfrey Icon. This is chargeable. Magic Tier. Faith Tier. And for stats, let's jump into stats now. We have 60 Vigor, we have 60 Intelligence. The Ash of War, by the way, is purely an Intelligence stat. We have 33 Faith with the Faith tier, so we could use buffs, 22 Mind, 20 Endurance. We're using Golden Vow, Hellish Brewery, and Terra Magica. And where do you get this weapon? Well, this one's a little bit complicated, but you're going to start the questline for this weapon at Waypoint Ruins in Limgrave. You have to talk to Sorcerer Sellen. You have to do her questline to get Glintstone Kris. And the best starting class for this one, in my opinion, is the Astrologer. You don't need too much investment other than Intelligence, since the Ash of War is all Intelligence. You're going to focus on Vigor, Mind, and of course Intelligence. And at number 12, we have the Hand of Malenia, which is a weapon, again, like Glintstone Kris, that the more I use it, the more I like it. Yeah, it takes a little bit of skill to pull off. It has a long animation on the Ash of War, but when you land it, it absolutely shreds several of the bosses in the game with successive attacks and pure physical damage. Yeah, I've had a lot of fun with the Hand of Malenia lately. I ended up really liking this weapon the more I use it. Let's jump into equipment where you have the Hand of Malenia plus 10, any seal for buffs. I wish there was a better dexterity sailing seal. We have 60 Poise apparently. Shard of Alexander, Maleficent's Prosthesis, Rotten Sword Insignia, Ritual Swords Talisman, Thorny tier, Faith tier. And then for stats, we have 60 Vigor, 22 Mind, 25 Endurance. We have 70 Dexterity. This is a pure Dexterity scaling weapon. We have 33 Faith with the Faith tier, so we can use our buffs, which are going to be Golden Vow and Howl of Shariri. And where do you get this weapon? Well, Malenia's Remembrance, which is fairly difficult to get in relatively late game. You get this all the way out in the Halleck Tree. You can access this by Consecrated Snowfield by doing the one puzzle that's at, I think it's called Ordina, the town that's north of the site of Grace and Consecrated Snowfield, to get you to the Halleck Tree, and it will be Malenia's Remembrance. And what is the best starting class for this one? In my opinion, the Samurai. I think the Warrior might be another good one. You have a couple of options here, but I'd go with the Samurai, and then you're going to focus on Dexterity, Endurance, Mind, and of course Vigor too. And at number 11, we have the Wing of Astel, usually a large target shredder, which scales purely with intelligence on its awesome Ash of War. However, in this case, I ended up taking on Gideon for fun, and it seemed to mostly stun lock him. Yeah, huge bonus there, able to hit him multiple times. It kind of messed up his posture a little bit. You're not going to get a regular poise break on him because he acts like an NPC invader, or if you were in PvP, but again, it mostly stun locked him. He wasn't able to do much here. A fun weapon to use, and it kind of looks cool too. The whole purple magic is pretty awesome. We're going to get a lot more gravity magic, supposedly, in DLC. It looks like, well, not supposedly, but it looked like in the trailer that there's going to be more gravity magic. I'm looking forward to that. That should add on to the couple of gravity weapons that we have so far. That's going to be awesome. In a second here, we're going to go over equipment, stats, everything you need to know. Man, between his monologue and then after you take him down, Gideon has to be probably the chattiest boss in all of the world of Elden Ring. Let's jump into equipment. For equipment, we have the Wing of Astel plus 10. We're using Lucett's Staff, the Golden Order Seal. We hit 51 Poise. The Spellblade set will boost this Ash of War, Shard of Alexander, Magic Scorpion Charm, Ritual Swords Talisman, Ritual Shield Talisman. We have the Magic tier, Faith tier. Let's jump into stats for this one. And for stats, we have 60 Vigor, 22 Mind, 20 Endurance. We have 60 Intelligence and 33 Faith with the Faith tier. We're using Golden Vow, Hellish Brewery, and Terra Magica. And the location, it's in the second part of Ansel River. You'll see the malformed enemy, whatever they're called. I can't remember what they're called. It's basically the mini Astel. You have to go up and above the one to grab it in its chest. It's a little bit difficult to get. The best starting class here is going to be the Prisoner. And that'll give you some of the dex requirement, intelligence that you need for this build. And you're going to focus intelligence, mind, and of course, vigor too. And next up here at number 10, I wanted to put these a little bit lower on the list, but I know people love them. Another weapon that does fall off a little bit on New Game Plus and beyond. Again, here on New Game Plus 7, it does have a little bit of a fall off, but the Magma blades are quite good, and the Ash of War does a lot of damage. Now, on this, the fire part of the Ash of War will scale with your faith stat. When you're physically hitting with the weapon, that part's going to be more AR, which makes it very much a split weapon between strength and faith. You want to have a good amount of strength and a decent amount of faith, too. I did a combination build that allows for both jump attacks and use of the Ash of War. And what do I mean by that? I mean I built around it using the Claw Talisman and the Raptor's Black Feathers, but of course also using something like the Shard of Alexander to boost the weapon art. That way you can do your jump attacks, you can build up on successive attacks, and you can also two-hand for the extra strength bonus and use the Ash of War. Yeah, the Magma Blades are definitely super cool. They made it in the top 10 on this list mainly because of feedback from people saying that they deserve to be in the top 10. I kind of did this as a popularity weapon because for me, I would probably put it closer to around 15 or so, but I know a lot of people love these weapons and they are a lot of fun to use too. And of course, we're going to go over equipment. Now, we have 2 Magma Blades plus 10. They're very difficult to farm for. You really only need 1, but if you want to do the jump attacks, definitely get 2. We have the Erdtree Seal. We're using the Raptor's Black Feathers, hit 51 poise, Shard of Alexander, Rotwing Sword Insignia, Claw Talisman, Fire Scorpion Charm. Then we have the Flame Tier, Faith Tier. Okay, and for stats on this one, it's very much split. So we have 50 Strength, we have 45 Faith with the Faith tier, we have 60 Vigor, 21 Mind, 25 Endurance. We're using Golden Vow, Flame Grant Me Strength, and Blessing's Boon. And the location on this one is in Volcano Manor. I'm going to leave a link to the description of my DLC prep video that'll show you how to get the Blasphemous Blade. The farm is actually on that route if you want to find the exact route of how to get to it, especially how to get to it early. Now you can go past Erdtree Gazing Hill up and behind it out through Mount Gelmor and get to Volcano Manor, or you can do the quest line that's in this area here between the 2 characters and that will take you to Volcano Manor too. And the best starting class for this one, in my opinion, is going to be the Confessor class. You're going to have a little bit of strength, a little bit of dex that you may need anyway. You're going to have faith that's perfect for this. We have strength, faith, endurance, and vigor as our primarily focused stats. Next up here at number 9, we have the Reduvia, an awesome weapon, and again, one that I moved on this list because I started using it more, and Bloodblade is absolutely ridiculous. So much bleed buildup and a good amount of physical damage too. I also have an early game guide for this weapon. I have an early game guide for Bloodhound's Fang, which obviously is going to make it a little higher on this list, and both those I'll put in the description below for anybody curious that wants to make those powerful builds early in Elden Ring. The Bloodblade regular Ash of War I like a lot too because you could put it on a bunch of different weapons. However, it does cost HP to use. The version on the Reduvia does not cost HP. It is a little bit endurance costy as far as Bloodblade itself, but overall the bleed buildup is absolutely worth it and the Ash is the best part of this weapon. For a dagger, this weapon can absolutely shred. I took on the Fire Giant here. He took substantial damage from Reduvia Bloodblade, getting in good bleed buildup and good damage in between the procs as well. If you actually make contact with the weapon, you get more damage and more bleed buildup. By the way, if you're following to this point and you're checking out the top 10 Somber weapons on this list, be sure to hit that subscribe button. I mentioned this earlier in the video, I'll mention it at the end, but this is a little bit of a longer video. If you enjoy Elden Ring content and want to join an awesome, friendly community, definitely be sure to subscribe and join the Discord as well. Discord is always in the pinned comment, and if you ever need help with Elden Ring, you can even go into the Discord and ask me any questions about the game or advice on builds, and I'll get back to you. There's other people in there that can help you too as far as building an awesome build that fits you perfectly. Also, shout out to everybody that is in the Discord. It's been awesome. Thank you so much, by the way, for everybody that's been helping with items and all that stuff throughout the past couple of months. It's been pretty incredible how nice people are. It's great finding a community like this one. Alright, in a second here, we're going to go over equipment stats, everything you need to know for an awesome Reduvia build, and don't forget the early game build for this is in the description below. Let's jump into equipment. For equipment, we have the Reduvia plus 10. We're using the Dragon Communion Seal because it scales with Arcane. We have the White Mask, we have 51 Poise, Shard of Alexander, Maleficent's Prosthesis, Ritual Swords Talisman, Lord of Blood's Exaltation, Green Burst Crystal Tier, Faith Tier, And for stats on this build, we have 60 Vigor, 21 Mind, 25 Endurance, 16 Strength. We have 45 Dexterity with Millicent's Prosthesis, 45 Arcane, 25 Faith with the Faith tier. We're using Golden Vow and Flame Grant Me Strength. And this weapon is incredibly easy to get. You can get it in the Aguil Lake Ravine right outside Mirkwater Cave. An NPC invader will drop it. And the best starting class for the Reduvia is the Bandit, which will have pretty much the exact stats you need to wield the Reduvia from the start of the game. Your focus is going to be Dexterity, Arcane, Endurance, and Vigor. And next up here at number 8 is another personal favorite on this list, and that's the Envoy's Longhorn, which does incredible amounts of holy damage through bubbles and can even destroy medium-sized enemies and absolutely shreds bigger bosses. This is seriously such a fun weapon. If you haven't done the bubble build yet in Elden Ring, definitely do the Envoy's Longhorn build. You will not regret it. It's a playthrough that you can absolutely have a blast with. Other than the final boss, pretty much most of the bosses in the game are going to take good damage from this. Let's jump into equipment. And we have the Envoy's Longhorn plus 10. We're using the Ur-Tree Seal. You can check out the armor set. We hit apparently 55 poise. We have the Shard of Alexander. We have the Sacred Scorpion Charm. Ritual Swords Talisman. Ritual Shield Talisman. And then lastly, we have the Holy tier and the Faith tier. Let's jump into stats. And for stats, we have 60 Vigor, 22 Mind, 23 Endurance. We have 20 Strength, 16 Dexterity. We have 80 Faith with the Faith tier, and we're using Golden Vow and Hellish Fury to buff this. The Envoy's Crown, by the way, will also increase the damage for this build by 15% on the Ash of War. And where do you get this awesome weapon? Well, you can get it in the Halig tree from the First Sight of Grace, the medium-sized Envoy enemies, and then there is one at the capital before it turns to Ashen Capital by the East Capital Rampart Sight of Grace, I believe it is, and he will also drop the Envoy's Longhorn. If it turns to Ashen Capital, though, you can only get it from the Halig tree at that point. The best starting class for this one's going to be the Confessor. You have a little bit of strength, you'll have faith, and your focus is going to be faith, mind, and of course you're going to be focused on vigor as well for this awesome bubble build. And at number 7 on this list, of course this was going to make it, we have the Bolt of Gransax, an incredible dexterity weapon. On New Game, this is incredible. Has a little bit of a drop-off again later on when bosses have a lot more HP on New Game Plus and beyond, but it's still a very reliable weapon with a ridiculous amount of range too. It's also a lot of fun to use and gives you a lightning option for dexterity. Lightning on weapons will scale with dexterity. Lightning for incantations obviously scales with faith, so it's an awesome weapon in terms of lightning damage on a weapon, and the Ash is incredible with ridiculous range, and of course it's chargeable too. Let's jump into equipment. And for equipment, we have the Bolt of Gransax, preferably plus 10, any seal for buffs. You can check out the armor set. We have 60 poise apparently. Shard of Alexander, Lightning Scorpion Charm. Godfrey Icon because this is chargeable. Ritual Swords Talisman. Lightning tier, Faith tier. And for stats on this one, we're of course a Dexterity build. We have 65 Dexterity. We have 33 Faith with the Faith tier so we can use our buffs, 60 Vigor, 22 Mind, 25 Endurance, and of course we're using Golden Vow and Hellish Fury to buff the damage of the Ash. And now for the location, you get this at the capital city. It's a little bit difficult to explain, but from the Ur-Tree Sanctuary Site of Grace, you're going to go down the elevator, and there's eventually a point where you can drop off and jump on the spear, and then you have to climb that spear to get the Bolt of Gransax. Once it's Ashen Capital, though, you can't get it. And the best starting class, the one I like the most here, is going to be the Samurai. It gives you all-around good stats to run this build, and you're going to focus on Dexterity, Mind, Endurance, and of course Vigor too. And at number 6, I have an early game guide, by the way, that's in the description below. We have Bloodhound's Fang, a weapon that definitely moved up for me. When I've been using it lately, I've been getting a lot of posture breaks too. Overall, the Ash of War on this weapon is pretty broken, and it does a ridiculous amount of damage, and pairs well with Bloodflame Blade. You see on the Godskin Duo, by the way, on New Game Plus 7, they have a combined around 40,000 HP, and just a couple uses of the Ash of War getting around 4,000 or 5,000 damage per each hit was pretty incredible. The Ash of War on this weapon is very, very reliable. Now, on this list, we're not really talking about regular weapons, but there is a weapon I would compare it to in terms of reliability throughout the entire game, and that is Guts Greatsword and Lion's Claw. Both this and Guts Greatsword and Lion's Claw can carry you from the beginning to end game without really ever having to change your build. Yeah, if you want to make Elden Ring a little bit easier from the start of the game to the end of the game, pick up this weapon. You're going to love this Ash of War and Bloodhound's Finesse. It's incredible. Does so much damage. You get a good amount of bleed build up too with Bloodflame Blade. Let's jump into equipment. For equipment, we have Bloodhound's Fang plus 10. We're using the Dragon Communion Seal, but it's just for buffs. We don't have any investment in Arcane. We have the White Mask, Shard of Alexander, Enlistant's Prosthesis, Ritual Swords Talisman, Lord of Blood's Exaltation, Green Burst Crystal tier, Faith tier. And for stats, we have 60 Vigor, 20 Mind, 26 Endurance. We have 45 Strength when we're two-handing this, 65 Dexterity with Enlistant's Prosthesis. We're using Golden Vow, Flame Grant Me Strength, and Blood Flame Blade to buff this build. And the location of this weapon is awesomely in Limgrave. You can grab this at the Ever Jail that's right here on the map in Limgrave, right south of the Aguil Lake south side of Grace. Not too hard to find. I have an early game guide for that one in the description. Best starting class is Samurai. Yeah, you should have enough strength or close to it to two-hand it right from the start, 15 Dexterity. And for their focus, you're going to go Dexterity, Vigor, Mind, Endurance, and a little bit of Strength. And number 5, we have the ridiculous weapon that is Marais' Executioner's Sword, one of the most broken weapons in the game. I'm using just 2 buffs here in Golden Vow, and I believe I either use Flame Grant Me Strength or Blood Boil, and the damage on it is absolutely ridiculous and can build up on successive attacks on its Ash. This is a really cool strength and arcane weapon. You can actually run the same build with Mohgwyn's Sacred Spear, which is going to appear after this one, and you can run both of those. This is definitely one of those weapons that's going to be reliable too. Now, on New Game Plus 7, it's a little harder to one-shot stuff if you buff it up like crazy, so I just used 2 buffs in my tier. But the damage ceiling is there if you want to poison proc this or do any of the crazy buffing stuff to get a lot of damage out of it. Overall, though, even with 2 buffs in the tier, it's still a very good weapon. Let's jump into equipment and stats for this one. For equipment, we have Marais' Executioner's Sword plus 10. We're using the Dragon Communion Seal. It scales with Arcane. We have 51 poise. We have the Shard of Alexander. Godfrey Icon because it is chargeable. Rotten Wing Sword Insignia. Ritual Shield Talisman. Thorny tier. Faith tier. And we're also using Blood Boil Aromatic, if I said it right that time. Let's jump into stats. And for stats, we have 60 Vigor, 22 Mind, 25 Endurance, 60 Strength when we're two-handing this. We have 45 Arcane, 25 Faith with the Faith tier, so you can use Golden Vow and Flame Grant Me Strength or Blood Boil. They don't stack. Blood Boil is a consumable, a little bit more difficult to get. The location is at the Shaded Castle. And that'll be in the Altless Plateau, so not too bad to get early in the mid-game and grab that. The best starting class for this one, in my opinion, is going to be Hero. You're going to have a little bit of Arcane, 16 Strength's not bad, and you're going to focus Strength, Arcane, Endurance, and of course Vigor too. And next up here at number 4, we have Death's Poker, one of the best weapons in the game. It's a little bit slow on the Ash of War. It has 2 different things you can do with it, the Trail and then the Explosion. The Trail I like a lot because it builds up Frost quickly. The damage ceiling on this weapon is incredible. This weapon honestly does absurd damage. The only reason that this isn't higher and I don't put it above the Darkmoon Greatsword is the Darkmoon Greatsword has range. It does stance damage as well, and it is a little bit quicker to use. If you don't charge it, it's easier for faster bosses when Death's Poker could be a little bit difficult. The Ash, of course, is all intelligence. Despite the descaling, I've mentioned this in my videos before, don't worry about that at all. If you're using just the Ash of War, you can invest heavily in intelligence. You can even throw in different spells and the like and whatnot. If you're using the weapon, though, of course, you're going to need dexterity if you're hitting with the weapon regularly. Yeah, it is something to remember when using Death's Poker. Like the Wing of Astel is another one that you can compare to this one that's kind of a dex intelligence weapon, but on the Ashes for both of them, it's entirely your intelligence stat and pure magic damage. A little bit of a tough fight here, no question. I ended up not having too many flasks towards the end. Again, against faster bosses like Malekith here, it could be a little bit challenging to pull this one off because you have to deal with the 2 inputs every time you're using the Ash. By the way, another thing to comment in the description below, I'm curious about this. If you like the format of this video, when I do list videos going over what starting class to use, what to level up along the way, information, if you want me to add in additional information, let me know as we head into DLC. Just let me know in the comments below if that's something you want to see. Alright, and that ended up being a pretty epic fight with Malekith here and Beast Clergyman. Pretty good fight overall. Death's Poker does a lot of damage. I got a couple Frost procs in there, which is no surprise. The Ash of War builds up Frost very fast. I think it's actually one of the fastest ways to proc Frost in the entire game. Yeah, Frost could be a really fun build. Death's Poker is definitely up there in terms of being able to proc Frost. That trail that it leaves can build up so quickly on several bosses, and the Explosion does a lot of magic damage. Let's jump into equipment. For equipment, we have Death's Poker plus 10, we have any seal for buffs, we have Lucette's Staff, we hit 51 poise, the Spellblade set will boost this. We have the Shard of Alexander, Magic Scorpion Charm, Ritual Swords Talisman, Ritual Shield Talisman, Magic Tier, Faith Tier. Let's jump into stats for this one. And for stats, we have the 17 Dexterity you need, 60 Intelligence, 60 Vigor, 22 Mind. We're using Golden Vow, Halash Iberian Terra Magic at above this. And location is in Caelid, where you fight the Deathbird. I actually showed it in an earlier clip. If you use holy damage can make the fight easier, that's in the general vicinity of where it is, and it will drop Death's Poker for you. You can get that one early game too. And since you need a little bit of dex and a lot of intelligence, the Prisoner class is going to be the best starting class for this one. Since it has both dexterity and intelligence, your focus is going to be Vigor, Intelligence, and of course Mind too. And now we're into the top 3, and at number 3 we have Mohgwyn's Sacred Spear, one of the most broken weapons in the entire game. This is a strength and arcane weapon. The Ash of War, which does the most amount of damage though, is primarily pulled from your arcane stat. And Mohgwyn's Sacred Spear is awesome for bleed and fire damage. It can crush most of the bosses in the game. Aside from the very final boss, it pretty much destroys everybody. It's an incredible weapon and very powerful. Now again, the Ash of War is what makes it the most powerful part. As far as the regular hits with the weapon, it's just okay. Let's jump into equipment. We have Mohgwyn's Sacred Spear plus 10. We're using the Dragon Community Seal because it scales with Arcane. We hit 51 poise. We have the White Mask. We have the Shard of Alexander, Fire Scorpion Charm, Ritual Swords Talisman, Lord of Blood's Exaltation. And then we have the Flame Tier, Fate Tier. Let's jump into stats. And for stats on this one, we have 60 strength when we're two-handing this. Same stats as the Marais Executioner for this one that I did for both these builds. 45 arcane, 60 vigor, and then we're going to be using Golden Vow and Flame Grant Me Strength to buff this, which will increase the fire damage on the Ash. Halashiburi, by the way, is 5% more, but it requires a lot more faith. Now, for the location of this, it's at Mohgwyn's Palace. There's two different ways you can get here. You can get here a couple different ways. One, you could do White Mask Fair's questline, which starts at the very beginning. And that will eventually end up at Rose Church, where you'll continue on the questline and eventually get a way to get to Mohgwyn's Palace, where you can get the remembrance for Mohgwyn's Sacred Spear. And the other one's going to have a portal over here, somewhere over here in Consecrated Snowfield, which also takes you to Mohgwyn's Palace. Man, I miss the old Consecrated Snowfield skip. But anyways, the best starting class is the Hero class. You have a little bit of Arcane, good amount of Strength. You'll focus Vigor, Arcane, Mind, Endurance, and Strength. And at number 2, we have the Darkmoon Greatsword, which is a staple in FromSoftware games because the Moonlight or Darkmoon Greatsword has appeared in pretty much everything that they make. This is a phenomenal weapon that has a very low FP cost for the amount of damage you get. This is a favorite weapon for many, and there's obviously so many reasons why. It does stance damage, it's pure magic damage. It's perfect for mages and battle mages because the Ash of War is entirely intelligence, and then the fact that for a minute after using relatively low FP, you continue to send out beams is awesome. Yeah, truly an awesome weapon that lives up to the name. I think we got a stance break in there too. Of course we did, because it does around, I think, 30-something stance damage on the Ash. On New Game Plus 7, by the way, all bosses have 30% more stance. However, you can still get in breaks with certain weapons. The Darkmoon Greatsword is one of them. By the way, Hoarah in Phase 2 has 0 magic and fire resistance, so if you're using a magic build, you can actually destroy Phase 2. However, he did come close to killing me there. That was relatively close. I had a little bit of HP left. By the way, people always ask why I want 60 Vigor. Well, 60 Vigor is really good for New Game Plus and beyond. Generally speaking, you're going to want that, and having 60 Vigor there saved me. By the way, one thing to note too is that all bosses on New Game Plus, all the way up to New Game Plus 7, will continue to do more damage to you. So the more vigor you have, the better for most players, at least in my opinion. Let's jump into equipment. For equipment, I actually had the wrong Darkmoon Greatsword equipped. I have a plus 10 and a plus 9. You'd want it at plus 10. Any staff for Terra Magica, any seal for buff. Spellblade set will boost this. Shard of Alexander, Magic Scorpion Charm, Ritual Swords Talisman, Godfrey Icon because it is chargeable, Magic Tier, Fate Tier. Now let's jump into stats for this build, and of course for this build it's going to look like some of the other Battle Mage type stuff that we've done. We have 60 Intelligence, 33 Faith with the Fate Tier, 60 Vigor, 22 Mind, 20 Endurance. And we're using Golden Vow, Halashiburi, and Terra Magic to buff this. You can also buff the Darkmoon Greatsword with the Jellyfish Shield too. And the location for this one's a little bit complicated, not too straightforward here. As Carria Manor, past once you beat Loretta, the first version of her, you have to go to Ranni's Rise to start her quest line to work towards getting the Darkmoon Greatsword. Yeah, you're going to want to start there, and eventually it'll take you to Nokron, which will be the meteor that's marked on the map when you fight Radahn. You'll continue working your way down, grab the Finger Slayer Blade and all that. It's a very complicated quest line. Well, it just has a lot of steps. I guess that's the best way of saying it. Best starting class here is going to be Astrologer. You're going to go heavy into intelligence, and of course for this, you don't need dexterity like the Prisoner's class as much, so that's a good starting class. At number 1, we have the Blasphemous Blade, to no surprise. Yeah, I thought about moving this one. I changed up my armor set for this one to make it look like something cool, I guess. I don't know. I'm not really the best with the armor sets and cosmetic stuff, but anyways, I wanted to move this one because I wanted to stop putting the Blasphemous Blade at number 1, but I really can't because it heals you, it does a ton of fire damage, and it truly is easy mode. I mean, it doesn't get any easier than spamming the L2 button with the Blasphemous Blade. It really turns Elden Ring into a fun game for people that like to explore and a lot less challenging game for people that like a challenge. If you like a challenge, it's not the best weapon in the world, but if you're looking for an easier time, the Blasphemous Blade is absolutely there for you. At this point, I don't think they're going to nerf it. We have the Blasphemous Blade plus 10. We have the Erdtree Seal. We have a mix of an armor set on there. If you want to check that out, it looked kind of cool. We have 51 poise. Shard of Alexander. Fire Scorpion Charm. Ritual Swords Talisman, Ritual Shield Talisman, Flame Tier, Faith Tier. And now it's time for stats. By the way, the reason I have 80 Faith for this, people that ask and note that the Astel Work kind of caps around 60 Faith, is so that you could use any Faith build. You have the full versatility of a Faith build with stats like this. We have 80 Faith, 60 Vigor. When you're two-handing this, you only need 16 Strength. I have 20 in case you want to use the Jellyfish Shield with incantations, and we're using Golden Vow and Hellish Fury to buff this. And where do you get the Blasphemous Blade? Well, it's at Volcano Manor. I have a DLC prep video below that will actually show you how to get all the talismans and the Blasphemous Blade relatively early because you can get it from Rhea Lucaria. It's in the description below that will help you get this weapon. The best starting class, in my opinion, for this one's going to be the Prophet. I like the Prophet for this. You could go with the Confessor too. Either one's really good, but since I'm going high faith right from the start, and you're probably going to want to start with incantations, it's good with the Prophet. Of course, you're going to focus on strength, faith, endurance, mind, and vigor. Thanks for watching this one. For everybody that watched this video, be sure to sub for an awesome growing community. A lot of Elden Ring content too. By the way, I'm probably going to go back to about one video a week ahead of DLC until we get closer to DLC to prevent burnout for myself and people that are playing the game. A lot of people are taking breaks now. Thanks for watching this one. I will catch you guys soon.